Uh, so thank you everybody for joining us today. So today we have a topic which is very close to each one of us hearts. So it is about emotional eating, and normally we connect food to comfort. So a, a few people make this connections, maybe on an everyday basis, and a few people make it occasionally. But everybody has this tendency of using food as a comfort ingredient in their life. So today we have Anaga Bhave, who is a counseling psychologist. So we'll be discussing with her on emotional eating. Hi Anaga, welcome, and thank you for taking out time to
Thank you so much
explain
for
us
having
this
me.
topic. So can you please tell us something about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Anakha and I'm a counseling psychologist. I have been practicing for the last 6 years, and as a counseling psychologist, I largely work with adults. So emotional eating, disordered eating, eating disorders, these are things that we see in our practice. And I think especially in today's day and age, it's a very relevant topic. So I'm very excited to be here and talk a little bit more about this with a practicing dietitian, because I think both of us can have our unique point of view that we can share with everyone here today.
Yes. So, there are a lot of situations in everyday life, like, people have a lot of stressful situations in case they have had a big fight or it was a bad day at office or work. People tend to use food as comfort food. So it's okay to do that sometimes. But then when does that line, where do you draw the line that, it is okay to eat and it is not okay to eat? When does this convert into a problem of emotional eating? So how do you define emotional eating?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the way you put it, you started off by saying when something stressful happens, we eat.
Hmm.
And that's one of the most common triggers for emotional eating, but it can also have other triggers like when we are getting bored, or if we are trying to suppress or avoid facing certain difficult emotions, and we turn to food in order to do that. That is called emotional eating. So, very simply put, any situation where we are eating to deal with certain emotions is emotional eating. Now, it can also happen in a positive way, like you said, sometimes we want to celebrate finishing a difficult task, or even when we were children, maybe our parents took us out for ice cream when we got good marks. So, food is a very, that is also an example of emotional eating to deal with positive emotions. But when we talk of emotional eating, I think especially in today's conversation, we'll notice that a lot of us tend to do that more with emotions which are difficult, like stress and boredom or anger. So,
Hmm.
emotional eating is generally not in moderation. So, like you said, once in a while, it's okay. But if you are turning to food repeatedly to comfort yourself or to cope with certain emotions, then it can become a disordered eating pattern.
Yeah, so I think when it becomes a habit, then it is a problem, when it is not under your control. Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of research also, Anaga, which says, that a few deficiencies in food actually leads to cravings. So, for example, if there is a magnesium deficiency, you will actually start craving for chocolate. If there is a sulfur deficiency, you'll crave more for sweets. And there are amino acid deficiencies like, tryptophan and tyrosine. So that will make you overeat because there is a lot of nutrient deficiency nowadays. See, what has happened is 100 years ago, the soil was more nutrient rich because the amount of food grown was very less and it used to depend on the weather cycle, climatic cycle. So now the soil is also deficient and therefore our food is also deficient in minerals. So that's the reason that these deficiencies are also making people crave more nutrients. And the nutrients, we don't get nutrients normally, so we tend to eat more of junk food because that is again our comfort food. So we confuse our nutrient deficiency with the junk food or high calorie food. Plus, if you're tired throughout the day, you have not eaten much because you have been busy, you don't think about food. So in maybe at the night, normally, when you're free and relaxed, then you tend to eat a bigger meal. So
Mhm.
people have this tendency of eating huge meals and overeating. So
Mhm.
this was the nutritional part. So now once you talk about emotions, now of course everybody has emotions and you need to express emotions, but how do we handle this a situation where we are overeating because there is so much food availability, and how do we handle emotions too?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's so interesting that there are nutritional deficiencies also that can trigger craving for certain foods. This is actually something new to me, because I'm obviously attuned to more the emotional aspect of food, but that's really interesting. I think, first of all, what's also important to talk about is the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger. So,
Mm-hmm.
when we talk of emotional eating, it's very important to know what triggers you to emotionally eat. If you find yourself doing it repeatedly, the first thing I will say in management is identify your triggers. And in order to identify your triggers, maybe it's important to highlight the difference between physical and emotional hunger. So,
Mm-hmm.
emotional hunger, for example, will come on very suddenly, whereas
Mm-hmm.
physical hunger develops gradually. Emotional hunger doesn't care if you're full. Physical
Mm-hmm.
hunger won't show up if you're feeling full and satisfied with your last meal. Emotional hunger craves certain specific kinds of food, comfort food, like we spoke about. But physical hunger, for all of us who have ever experienced hunger, we'll eat anything and everything that's in
Yeah.
front of us if you're physically feeling hungry. And lastly, satisfying emotional hunger makes you feel feelings of shame, maybe guilt, powerlessness, because you're impulsively eating those comfort foods. But
Mm-hmm.
physically, if you're satiating your hunger or satisfying your hunger, it doesn't make you feel bad about yourself. So, first is to ask yourself, when you say identify your triggers, ask yourself what are different moods that make me more likely to emotionally eat. So, like I said, stress, boredom are the most common. Also,
Mm-hmm.
notice situations. So,
Mm-hmm.
have you associated reward and punishment with food? Because if that's the case, then the day I get a promotion, I may want to binge eat a big
Mm-hmm.
this thing of pizza, a big helping of pizza. And once in a while, of course, like we said, it's okay. But know your triggers. Do you feel like overeating or emotionally eating when you're in a good mood as a way to reward yourself? Or do you tend to restrict yourself from eating as a way of punishing? This is
Mm-hmm.
very interesting because how our family has dealt with food growing up will impact
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So I was rewarded with chocolate cake and ice cream when I got good marks. Even as an
Mm-hmm.
adult, I will associate certain foods with reward. And if I was sent to bed without my dinner because I did something wrong, then I'm going to associate, dieting and restrictions and things like that as a way of punishing
Mm-hmm.
myself. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
important to see this sort of childhood impact also on our adult eating patterns.
Yeah.
In terms of management, there's a whole lot of things that I think are we can talk about. But another technique that I really like is maintaining an emotional eating diary. So it's
Okay.
basically a way for you to identify your eating patterns, and
Mm-hmm.
in that, I would suggest that whenever you eat, when you haven't felt hungry, try to
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself what was happening when you did that, what was the situation that led to that, and what were the emotions that were coming up for you. So this way you can
Mm-hmm.
identify your triggers. And secondly, also see, did you reach for food immediately? Did you wait for some time in the middle? Did you try distracting yourself from that? Did you try any healthy ways of dealing with that emotion, like maybe exercising, stretching, talking to a friend?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do instead of emotional eating?
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, the more we understand our patterns, the more in control we are of not
Mm-hmm.
repeating unhealthy eating habits and rebuilding that healthy relationship with
Yeah.
our food. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually, that is a very good point. That first of all, the thing that you said, that growing up, what has been your triggers for food, that's very important. Like we associate birthdays with cakes,
Yeah.
popcorn with movies. So we always associate these foods and keep. So of course, it's not a one-day job that we can change the buildup of our food relation that we have done throughout the day. I mean, throughout the life. Yeah. So we have to make it a point that we work on it. It is not going to change overnight. So we work on it for at least give yourself 6 months time. And maintaining a diary is very a good idea. I normally
Yeah.
tell people to maintain food diaries. So an emotional diary for people who can understand what the emotional triggers are. That's a very good suggestion. So I think once they start maintaining and they get an insight of what is the reason, that is going to be very helpful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, this is not this is it's very hard to extract emotion from food, because that's food is such a big part of everyone's life, and
Mhm.
every single culture that exists on the planet, food is inbuilt into, some celebration, some happy occasion, some funeral, sad
Mhm.
occasion. So we
Mhm.
always will find ourselves emotionally connected to food, but whether our relationship with food is healthy or not, that's something that we have to gauge and then we have to work on. So one thing that I think when we talk of emotional eating, especially overeating when you're emotional eating because of stress or boredom, um, is that it's a very mindless form of activity. You're doing it very
Mhm.
impulsively without thinking about it,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
one way of doing that is practicing the opposite, which we call mindful eating. Mindfulness is
Mhm.
nothing other than being fully present in that moment. So whether
Mhm.
you're mindfully breathing, mindfully walking, mindfully eating, you're fully
Mhm.
present in that activity that you're doing. So
Yeah.
our ancestors used to do this. They used to
Mhm.
sit on the floor and eat with their hands without any
Yes.
TV or, smartphones around them, of course.
Mhm.
So all their senses and they were fully attuned to the activity of eating, and this way,
Mhm.
we also don't overeat when we're very
Mhm.
mindfully present. So I think mindful eating is a great way to pay attention to the internal cues of our body for hunger and fullness. If I'm watching TV and eating, then I can go on eating. I don't pay
Yes.
attention to that feeling of fullness or satisfaction. So this is
Mhm.
again a habit that sometimes it takes to develop. Another suggestion that I give to people who have been on and off diets is that,
Mhm.
if you're somebody who's been on and off diets for most of your life, then again you
Mhm.
won't be able to pay attention to your body's cues of hunger and fullness. So
Mhm.
create a hunger scale for yourself. Now, this
Mhm.
hunger scale is simply one means you're absolutely starving, you're physically feeling weak, fatigue, maybe stomach is growling, and all those things. And
Mhm.
10 means you're completely full. So,
Mhm.
like after a big holiday meal, how you feel absolutely stuffed. And then every few hours, see where you are on that scale. Give it a
Mhm.
number. This
Yeah.
way you're just developing more awareness of your body's
Mhm.
natural cues, and then you're able to rely on physical hunger to lead
Mhm.
your eating habits as opposed to emotional hunger to lead your
Mhm.
eating habits. And again, this is a work in progress, so it takes time, but for people who practice this, they see great results.
Yeah, they do. And in fact, I normally tell people now, many of the clients that come to me, they have a particular time when they overeat, usually in the evenings or once they are home. So I always tell them the time that you have targeted, I mean, which you have identified, start doing something else in that time. So, you can go for a walk, or you can indulge into some hobby at that time, or you can
Hmm.
listen to some good music, or take out time for reading. So distraction is also a technique which I normally tell clients that, you can a few times you can give into the emotional eating with a
Hmm.
controlled portion, and a few times you need to distract yourself. You cannot always give into emotions. And
Right.
like you said, the practice would come once they start. So starting
Yeah.
is the most important point. Once they start, then it will come up. And one more thing I would like to add is, uh, now that we have identified that how parents deal with food is how kids would deal. So there are a lot of people now who have young kids. So they can start inculcating habits wherein, their kids don't associate certain food items with certain situations, and they
Right.
don't use food for their emotional expression. So that's one important thing takeaway from today. So anything you would like
Absolutely.
to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many examples around us, right? When
Mm.
a child is crying, the mother will give the child lollipop or chocolate.
Yeah,
So
yes.
we give them sugary food, we give them foods which may be a little unhealthy to just kind of in that moment suppress that emotion. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it's the shortcut and it will
Hmm.
get the work done. Maybe the child will stop crying, but in the
Yes.
long term, they are creating these associations in their mind. So I think the healthier way of doing that would be to address the child's emotions, to ask them what is making you
Hmm.
cry right now, or just saying it to them. Oh, I see something has upset you. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to tell me what has upset you? So children are often very receptive to talking about their emotions. but the tone has to be set by the family members and the parents
Yeah.
especially. So if
Hmm.
we make it normalized to talk about our emotions from a very
Hmm.
young age, where the child can say, I'm feeling hurt because the teacher scolded me today, or I'm feeling jealous because my sister got better marks than me, and that's why I'm crying. Then over
Hmm.
time they become more attuned to their emotions, and they won't
Yeah.
run to the fridge or run to the kitchen to feel
Hmm.
good that they are feeling sad or jealous or angry, right? So
Yeah.
it starts from a young age, and I think that was a very good message from you, that for anybody who has young children, we can be mindful about these little things that we do
Yes.
that create associations. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you so much, Anaga, for the time. And thank you, everybody,